right. Now, I believe it is showing up on Substack here. Let's give it a few minutes just to let people
Oh, excellent. So I
join in.
actually I like joining from StreamYard, but like it doesn't give me the option then to share it to my own folks. So maybe I can log in.
Oh, it is live now, and it should let you.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
I sent an invite over, but it looks like we got some people coming in. Oh, all right, and we lost him for a second there. Well,
I'm
as
back.
we're getting all queued up and everything. All right, welcome back.
Hey, I'm here. Technology works.
Excellent. That's the fun thing about when every platform tries to make their own unique way to do the same
Yeah.
thing.
That's how it goes. Our tech overlords, sometimes they don't get it right. That's just the reality.
Yeah, yeah. Believe it or not, they aren't as perfect as they'd like us to believe. But Ezra, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk with me
Of course,
today.
of course. Yeah.
Uh, we got some people coming in now. Just want to let everyone know that this is Ezra Levin with Indivisible. You've probably heard of his organization. It's had steady growth over the past 8 years. Uh,
We're going on 10 years if you can believe it.
wow, wow, that's unbelievable. I remember I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I remember when the Indivisible groups started popping up, in some of the suburbs, and then the
Oh
Phoenix ones
yeah.
started growing, and now they're doing some really really impressive work out there.
The Arizona Indivisibles are really on fire. They've done a whole bunch of work in the past several years. I've been out to Phoenix several times. I was out there before Gallego ran for Senate, but we had Gallego and Mondaire Jones trying to push Kirsten Sinema to get on board with democracy reform before she stabbed us in the back. But I've also been out to Prescott, Arizona several times, which is just a great area, very in theory Republican area, but very strong indivisible group out there, doing just the Lord's work. Yeah, love our Arizona Indivisibles.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is your experience, but I feel like the places that are considered Republican strongholds or MAGA country sometimes have the most dedicated and ardent indivisible groups. Just I imagine just because they face the toll of the administration's agenda more bluntly than some other areas.
Look, I think that's right. Look, I'm from a rural and red area of Texas, and where I grew up, the word Democrat was a bad word. Like the Democratic Party that was local was a joke. Nobody volunteered for that Hayes County Democratic Party, and there wasn't a lot of organizing going on. And I do think after Trump was first elected, people were looking for community. People were looking for
Oh
were
yeah.
there other folks who thought like them, and it turns out even in these Republican plus 20 districts, even in these places that Donald Trump carried by double digits. You see, there are a lot of people out there that don't want that and are willing to organize and are looking for community. And I think there's power in that. That's how, in a democratic republic, you build power. You got to do it locally. That's how our power is distributed across the country geographically. That's why you have state reps. That's why you have city council members.
Right.
That's why you have U.S. senators. That's how we distribute power. So if you want to wield power politically in this country, you can either be super rich or super famous, or you can organize. Like those are the options.
And for I know I speak for myself. I feel like we are in much better hands when it is groups of grassroots organizers rather than a few of the
Yeah.
world's wealthiest controlling our laws.
You know what? That's a big statement, but I'm going to go along with you on that one. I think I
Yeah,
agree.
bringing out some hot takes. I do want to talk about something that is getting a lot of buzz lately, mainly because it's the next big protest day coming up.
Yeah,
I know I characterized it as a strike, but then as soon I went to Indivisible's information on the page about the May Day action
yeah,
coming up.
that's
And
right.
it's not technically a strike. It's not a labor strike, but it
That's
is
right.
an economic blackout of sorts. Maybe you could kind
That's
of
right.
explain the distinction and let people know what the plan is.
Look, a strike is like a technical term. It's what you would use in the labor community. It comes with all these other kind of requirements attached to it. The inspiration for this Friday for May Day, I would look to these heroes who are organizing in the Twin Cities against ICE and the secret police force that was bringing the boot down on that community. What they called for was a day of truth and freedom. And if you all remember, this is in late January, and they had thousands upon thousands of faith leaders and nurses and teachers and just community members coming out and saying, look, we're not going to go to school. We're not going to go to work. We're not going to shop because we're going to flex our economic power, not just to protest, but flex our economic power to bring the attention of the entire community and the entire country on what this regime is doing to us. And it was only a few days after that action that the regime ultimately had to back off. They had to back off because the PR hit they were taking was just so intense. The public was turning against the Trump regime. They were turning against ICE. They were turning against CBP and the broader deportation agenda because people saw Renee Good's murder. They saw Alex Preddy's murder, and they saw the slander from the regime against normal everyday Americans. In some cases, a VA nurse, in the case of Alex Preddy, who just was showing up to exercise his First Amendment rights in defense of his community, and a secret police force murdered him in the streets. And in response to that, we saw this incredible organizing on the ground that was something more than a Saturday protest, something even more than No Kings in its depth and its intensity. And so the way that I view May Day is it is a structure test for the movement. And by structure test, I mean when we head into the midterms, we know what Donald Trump is planning to do. He's telling us what he plans to do. He fears free and fair elections, and he plans to do what he can to sabotage them, to hold on to power. That's what all authoritarians do. They don't like to give up power. And so the question for all of us is, well, what are we going to do when that happens? What are we going to do when it happens? And we think that the folks in Minnesota showed us a way forward, which is flexing not just our people power in numbers, but also our economic strength. And so that's what we're going to see on Friday. We're going to see people all across the country in blue states, in red states, in purple states, rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas, figuring out ways as a community to flex that economic strength. And some places you'll see schools closed down. You'll see workers off of the job. You'll see people out of stores. In some places, you'll see community events and big protests. But this is about us not just showing up on Saturdays, not just doing the same thing again and again and again, but figuring out where are we strong, where are we weak, where do we need to grow so that when November comes, we're not just crushing them electorally, but we're protecting the results with strategic organizing everywhere where it matters.
And I kind of want to talk about the build up to this moment, as you know,
Yeah.
of course, the major penultimate moment is the midterm elections.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people have come a really long way since January 2025. When the Trump administration came
Yeah.
in, they put off as if they had this, irrefutable mandate, and that
Yeah.
any opposition was futile. And there
Yeah.
was, what I personally saw was just a wave of hopelessness from people.
Yeah.
Now, we're a year and change in, and there have been multiple cabinet resignations. There have been historic protests, and there are people showing up and even organizing and creating indivisible groups who had never attended a protest before. What's it like seeing that from the bird's eye view that you have?
Look, it's this, the best of times and the worst of times. That's what it feels like. And you could say that about the Twin Cities, where you have the most horrific acts of cruelty and sadism exercised on Americans. And at the same time, the most beautiful, inspiring acts of neighborliness, of courage, of hope displayed by folks on the ground. And that's what I've seen all across the country, really, since Trump won re-election. I know that the broader political system did not respond the way the people that I've been organizing with responded, because the people that have been organizing in indivisible groups, they didn't take several months to say, okay, maybe this guy is a threat. Maybe we should start organizing. It was immediate. Immediately, we started seeing a surge of engagement on the ground all over the country. And I think it's going to be really important to tell the story of what happened in 2025 and 2026, because I think that story is one where an authoritarian won power, won the White House, won the Senate, won the House, had the entire political system under his thumb, attempted to concentrate power in his hands. And in response to that, You saw elites in media, elites in universities, elites in law firms, elites in business, elites in the Democratic Party at the national level say, well, he's in power now, he's in
Yeah.
charge. I guess we're going to just have to go along with it. That was one part of the story. And the other part of the story was normal, everyday Americans, not professional politicos, but people who cared about their neighbors, cared about their communities, cared about their democracy, saying, fuck no. I'm going to organize. I'm going to exercise my constitutional rights. I'm going to connect with my community, and I'm going to figure out how we protect ourselves. And that is what's made the difference. That is what transformed Trump from this inevitable, unstoppable force in early 2025, as you're describing, to this, gosh, this unpopular, lame duck president on the way out with a coalition fracturing. I think that is how we got here. And it doesn't mean we're all okay. It doesn't mean he's not going to do damage. One thing we know about authoritarians is when they're cornered, they lash out. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now. We're seeing that with the Iran war, or with Venezuela, or with threatening Cuba or Greenland. I think we're going to see more of that, but he's undeniably weakened. And I think that the direct connection between normal everyday people deciding to stand up for their own rights and that political path being traveled by the entire country, I think it's undeniable.
No, I definitely 100% agree. I think just the mentality of people across the country is completely different than it was in January 2025. The best example I have is so I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and in January, February 2025, there was a Northwest Valley Indivisible group that formed. And
Mm-hmm.
initially, they started off, just a handful of people. They were going outside of local Tesla dealerships and having
Yeah.
protests. And then they started getting bigger, and then they got bigger, and then they started protesting outside of Republican Representative Abe Hamadah's office and getting
Mm-hmm.
bigger and bigger. And they've evolved and grown into, frankly, a well-oiled machine of unpaid volunteers
Yeah.
who know where to be, know how to make noise in an effective way. And at this point, they've even been able to successfully organize against an industrial warehouse that ICE was going to use in Surprise, Arizona. They were able to
I,
fill the city council with people speaking. They've had protests out there almost every day.
yeah.
And the use of that facility is actually on hold. And these are
Yeah.
all people who, in 2024 hadn't been to a protest, weren't really politically active in any way, but they felt hopeless, they saw a need, they found a way to activate, and they've grown and evolved in just a really, really incredible way.
I I am just I'm moved by that, right? The level of horror that we're seeing all across this country being driven by this authoritarian regime is, I mean, it's enough to drive people into hiding. That's the intent, right? The intent is to scare people, to make people think, well, I'm under threat, I better protect myself. And what we're seeing in places like Surprise, Arizona, all over the country is folks who might be directly under threat because they're undocumented, or they're immigrants, or they're part of the class of citizen that is being targeted by this regime, or maybe they're not and they're fearful for their neighbors and they want to show up and support, but they're coming together to demonstrate it's not fearlessness. There's reason to be scared. What it is courage, because they know there is danger, and yet they are standing up anyway. They are standing up in defense of their neighbors, in defense of their communities anyway. And gosh, it's enough to make you believe in democracy. I got to say that is what we need. As long as we have big corporations and big donors and big politicos who are making all the decisions and driving the direction of the country, we're going to get more of what we've seen. And so I think one of the encouraging things right now is yes, there are people rising up everywhere to push back against this regime, but it's also that kind of organizing force that you need on the ground to chart a different direction for the country once Donald Trump is long gone, wherever he goes after he leaves the White House, hopefully sooner rather than later. I think if we're doing our job in this moment, we are empowering people around the country to become the powerhouses that you're describing in Surprise. It's not Ezra Levin who is leading the Indivisible movement, or even this big Indivisible national organization that's supporting groups on the ground. Fundamentally, it comes down to normal everyday people deciding that they need to play a role in their democracy. And they're going to figure out what role that is. It's not going to be me who figures that out. All we can do is say, hey, you can be an indivisible group. You can organize yourself. We can provide some trainings and some tools, but ultimately, you're smart about what's happening locally. You can figure out where your leverage is and focus on that, because the opportunities available to somebody in Surprise, Arizona are going to be different than the ones available to somebody in San Francisco or Austin, Texas, or in Utah. And that's how democracy works. But if you have a one size fits all program where it's just like everybody's on the email list and everybody jumps when they get the email, one, I don't think that works. But two, it leaves so much value on the table. There's so much brilliance and creativity and insight at the local level. And I just think it's important for people to understand nobody's going to ride in to save the day for you. Nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, now it's your time to lead and we are going to follow you. No, 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 no. The way that you actually develop political power is you just organize. You organize and demand it. And the good news about living in America in 2026 is this is still a constitutional republic. You still have First Amendment rights. You still have the right to organize. That might not be true forever, but it is true right now. Power is out there to organize. You just have to go and organize for it.
And going off of that, I mean, organizing in a way that matches your community, that provides a
Yes,
service
yes.
and is able to exercise people's role in democracy appropriately. You know, I feel like a lot of organizations and localities have begun to develop this muscle, this reflexive
Mm,
opposition, where they know where to listen with they hear a call out for a protest, or if they hear something the administration is doing that they don't agree with, they know who to reach out to
mm.
protest, or what
Yeah,
have you, or in the case of this Friday, participate in a nationwide economic blackout.
yeah.
That may be kind of a new thing for people, but I think it's especially important in a time when billionaires and the wealthiest, richest people in our society own a number of politicians, and
Yeah.
they pay to have our laws favorable to them. Um, and so that's why I think an economic lockout can do the most damage, because at the end of the day, all these guys really care about is their bottom line.
I think that the economic pressure tactics that we've seen apply effectively over the last 16 months or so have been bright spots during a very dark time. You think about Jimmy Kimmel being threatened by the regime, and immediately you have millions of people saying, "Nah, I'm canceling my Disney subscription. I'm not going to go along with this." He's back on the air in hours. You have Spotify running ads to recruit for ICE, and you have tons of people canceling their subscription to Spotify. They remove the ICE recruitment ads. You have Avelo Airlines making a whole business model over deporting Americans to other countries in service of the secret police force here. They get protested all over. They stop doing it. This is a tool in our arsenal. This is a tool we can use, a nonviolent, effective organizing tool to apply pressure directly to the system. So it has to listen, so it can't ignore. I'm not saying this is the only tool we have to use. I'm not saying it's the only tool that can be effective. But if we're not using our economic power when some guy comes in and tries to sabotage our elections, I just don't think we're running the full campaign that we're going to have to run. I think the world of No Kings protests, we have been leading behind with a lot of other folks to make No Kings as big as possible. But nobody should think that when Trump tries to sabotage the midterm elections, that millions of people showing up on a Saturday is going to save democracy on its own. It's not. You're going to have to do more than that. You're going to have to marry the breadth of the organizing that we've seen at No Kings with the depth of economic pressure tactics that we've seen in places like the Twin Cities. And May Day, this Friday, is an opportunity for us to test that strength and see, well, where are we strong? Are we strong in this locality and that locality that we know is going to be under threat in the midterms? Or do we need to build up more? Which tactics worked on the ground and which ones didn't? Where do we need to invest more training and capacity so that we can protect the election results when November comes? And so I would encourage everybody, participate in some way. Maybe you can take off from work. Maybe you can take off from school. Maybe you can not go shopping. Maybe you can skip some of the shopping that you might have done otherwise. Maybe you can attend a local protest or hold a local protest. But I would encourage everybody, don't be alone on May Day. Be part of a community that is committed to protecting democracy, committed to organizing, committed to nonviolent tactics, because we need more people in this movement. We need to figure out how we can grow and strengthen this movement, because that's ultimately how we're going to succeed in taking this regime down electorally and protecting the results when we do that.
Now, I do have a question because my
Yeah,
plan on Friday is I'm going to go through all my subscriptions and double check and see which ones maybe don't align with what I want.
yeah.
Like for example, canceling Spotify a few months back. I want to go through all mine and just cancel the ones that don't align with my vision for our country. I will say that that feels to me like it's not as a communal experience. It's easy when you go to a protest to feel inspired and to feel like you're part of a big movement.
Yeah.
But when you're staying home, not not going to work, not buying anything, it can feel isolating and it can be hard to feel like you're part of a big movement. Is there anything people can do to commune during this time, to recognize that they're not in this alone and that there is a bigger impact and a bigger picture than just them at home closing their wallet?
Look, I don't want to put down your efforts individually. I think that's good too, and everybody can do something. But I do think you're hitting on something that's really, really important, which is like if you listen to the experts in authoritarianism, where authoritarians have succeeded all over the globe, one thing they will tell you is authoritarians want you to feel alone. They want you to feel isolated because the number one threat to an authoritarian concentrating power is organized nonviolent people power. Like that is the thing they fear. This is why you see them saber rattling at people exercising their First Amendment rights so much. That's something that is a threat to their power. So, one thing that you can do, one of the most effective opposition tactics is to refuse to be alone, to find that community. Obviously, I love Indivisible. We support Indivisible groups all over the country. There's a local Indivisible group near 95% of the people who are watching this, I guarantee you. And also, Indivisible might not be your home. Maybe you want to join a Working Families Party or 5051 or a local immigrant rights advocacy group or a mutual aid circle. There are ways for you to plug into your community. So the number one thing I would encourage you to do is find what that community is. If you need a starting place, find your local Indivisible group. I guarantee you they are doing something around May Day and in the coming weeks as we lead up to this midterm election. So if you're feeling isolated in this moment, don't be isolated. You got a community here. And if you're one of the small number of people who happen to be in a organizing desert, there's no one near you, there's no organization, there's not an Indivisible group or any other local organizing hub, you can start your own. Really, every single one of the 2,700 local Indivisible groups that are on the map right now, they were started by somebody who just raised their hand and said, well, nobody else is doing it. I guess I'm going to do it with my buddy. And some of the powerhouses we now see organized around the country, pushing the Democratic Party to fight back, pushing Republicans to break from Trump, pushing their own communities to organize in defense of their neighbors. They're started by a couple of people who then pulled in more community members. People in this moment want to be some part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of something real. And I'm sorry, you're not going to find that by doom scrolling. You're not going to find that even by consuming the right political commentary. As much as I like talking, as you can tell, you're gonna find that by actually connecting in community and being part of something real. That's where the real stuff happens.
Yeah, most definitely. And I want to hit back on something you mentioned earlier, where this is a really good opportunity to see where different communities have a strength of
Yeah.
economic blackout. Is there a way that you or anyone's going to be measuring the success of participation in May Day?
Look, I think here the two things that I want to see. One, I want to see an unexpected number of actions in an unexpected number of places, and I want to see different types of actions, some of which will be successful and some of which will not be. Because this is in part a demonstration of strength, but it's also a test of strength. So what they do in North Carolina is going to be different than what they do in San Francisco, is going to be different than what they do in Surprise, Arizona. And we can learn from each of these activities and then glean from that best practices that we then use across the country come November. So I think you'll see a lot of places where entire schools or school systems close down. I think you'll see large numbers of workers decide not to go on the job. I think you'll see lots of places that decide to boycott specific stores or specific industries. That's good, and we'll learn from that. Some of it will work, some of it will not work. And it's on us as national organizers. I don't mean Indivisible, but the broader us, all of us who are throwing in on this, to say, okay, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well. And over the next 6 and 7 months, as we're heading into the midterms, here's where we're going to plus up. And here are the good best practices that came out of this. So I think it is different than a No Kings, which is how many people did you have? Did you have all the coverage? That's relatively simple. This is a tactical escalation. It is more complicated. It takes more lift. It's one thing to show up on a Saturday. It's another thing to say, I'm going to take a sick day. It's another thing to say, my kids aren't going to go to school. It's another thing to say, I'm just not going to shop at all. That's harder to do. It's a bigger lift for the country. And also, it's the kind of lift I think we're going to need to do. I don't want to tell people, well, you can just check this box and then we'll save democracy. You can just do this easy thing and everything is going to be fine. The real talk here is we're asking a lot of people. We're asking people to take the responsibility for their democracy in their own hands. And we're asking them to do that because we think that's actually what's necessary.
And I really like that approach because it allows people to be creative. If you
Oh, yeah.
sometimes if you give someone a box to check, then that's all they think of is, oh, I just need to show up, I just need to be at this place or do what I'm told. I'm thinking of I want to say it was December or January, where there was an economic protest at Home Depots. I'm
Oh,
sure you
yeah.
heard about this,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
people were buying ice scrapers
I
from Home
did. Yeah.
Depot and then just getting back in line, clogging up their return line by returning these 55-cent ice scrapers. It's genius. It's very creative.
Mm-hmm.
It slows down Home Depot, lets them know that they don't want ICE agents at Home Depot like the Trump administration has been doing, and they
Yep.
were going along with it. And it's something that I never would have thought of on my own. And so I think
This
giving people that opportunity to be creative just really, really shows what we're made of.
I think this is where the strength of the current pro-democracy movement really is. If you look at even something like No Kings, this didn't come from me or anybody at Indivisible cooking this up in a room. This wasn't some poll-tested phrase that were like, oh, that's the one that's going to catch fire. It came because we saw 50-51 protests in February and March of last year around the town halls, around when Elon Musk was riding high in the regime. And they were showing up with signs that said No Kings organically. It was just spreading already. I think most of the best ideas that have generated more engagement aren't things that were cooked up in some back room. There were things that were cooked up by people on the ground who were feeling out this is what resonates. And lo and behold, it did. You think of the Portland protesters who showed up in frog costumes and unicorn costumes, which was nobody thought of that at National and said, hey, everybody get unicorn costumes. No, it was this hilarious response to these accusations that we were violent protesters or mean the community ill. And the best way to respond to that the Portland community figured out is like, let's just make fun of them. And it's brilliant. It's a great insight, and it might not be the natural instinct from some folks who were like, "Oh, we're under threat, and we've got to seal ourselves." And no, actually, making fun of the situation was a great way to defang the regime, and that caught on like wildfire across the Indivisibles and No Kings movement. And so when come No Kings 2, when they started calling out National Guard against us in Texas and Virginia, everybody's like, what are you doing? That makes no sense. Like there are kids and there are signs that are funny and dancing and laughing and unicorn costumes, and you're calling out the National Guard, and that is not something that could have happened if this was just some like corporate campaign where you message us. It came because it organically grew out of the movement itself.
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine that getting pitched in a boardroom. But it worked. And one of the things authoritarians hate the most is being turned into a joke. They have
That's
fragile
right.
egos, they're narcissists.
Yep.
And the idea that they're sending fully armed military guards to arrest an inflatable frog it just reveals the joke that they are, honestly.
There was one arrest at No Kings 2 in Alabama. A woman had dressed up as a giant dictator with the visual pun you can imagine, and they accused her. They accused her, I believe, of disturbing the peace. She was exonerated, though. That it is that kind of I think it's important for people to understand that this is our democracy and that there's no rule book that is written for you have to sign these petitions or you've got to show up in this kind of protest or you've got to use this kind of messaging. Anybody who is pitching at the national level that says this is exactly what you have to do, they're not connected to the reality. They're not actually producing the kind of tactics that are going to be effective. And so I would encourage people to get creative on the ground, to work with their local community on how can we show up in May Day in a way that captures attention, that pulls more people in and helps build up the strength of our community, and then let everybody know about it. Take pictures, take video, get press coverage, write op-eds, and elevate these tactics that are coming out so that other communities can replicate them over the next several months.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I know we got to wrap up. I just do want to remind everyone, first of all, thanks for taking the time to listen. Thanks for talking with me, Ezra.
Oh, of course.
Movements like this, they only need about 3.5% of the population to make an effective impact. And so if, we have a few million people who participate, it really sends some waves. And we've already seen 5-8 million people coming at these last protests. So I expect it's going to be quite the force to be reckoned with on May Day.
I believe so. I think we're going to see a lot. I think we're going to learn a lot. And I think we're going to keep on building from there.
Definitely. Well, I'd love to follow up and catch up with you after, see what we learn, and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Excellent. I wanted to shout out Mayday Strong. If you're looking for how to participate, go to maydaystrong.org. These are the folks who are really leading this charge, and Indivisible. We're just trying to do our best to support these heroes who are on the front lines.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Ezra.